Okay, so picture this. You and your partner, you're building a life, right? Maybe raising kids, maybe one of you is looking after family or, pursuing something that doesn't bring in cash right away. Or maybe, bam, a job loss.
Yeah, happens all the time.
Right. And suddenly there's this big question hanging there. What about their retirement savings? Does it just stop because they don't have that paycheck, that earned income?
That's a really common scenario. And yeah, the worry is real. Planning retirement together feels like a team sport, but the rules for things like IRAs, they're all about individual earned income. It can feel like, I don't know, trying to fly a plane with only one engine working.
Exactly. It seems like a huge roadblock when the whole system focuses on individual paychecks, but you're trying to build something together. But what if your sources for this deep dive show there's actually a way around that? A specific tool that says no, that savings ability doesn't have to disappear.
A way to keep both engines running, essentially.
Yes. Keeping both partners building their own retirement security, using the couple's overall financial picture.
And that tool, that strategy, is what people generally call the Spousal IRA. So today, we're really digging into your sources. Got some great stuff here from T. Rowe Price, Port Brown, Pacific Tax and Financial Group, Intrust, Investopedia, Pacific Life, Stifel, Charles Schwab. A good mix.
And our mission today is really to, cut through the noise, break down the strategy, figure out how it works, who can use it, and honestly, why it's so incredibly important for couples in these exact situations. We want to pull out the key takeaways for you.
Right. Let's get straight into it. First things first, what is a spousal IRA?
Whoa.
Because the name itself can be a bit confusing.
Yeah, that's a good starting point, because spousal IRA sounds like maybe a joint retirement account. Something like that?
That's what a lot of people think. But no, you don't go to your bank or broker and ask to open a spousal IRA account.
Yeah.
It doesn't actually exist as a specific type of account.
Okay, interesting. So it's not a special kind of account. What is it then?
It's just a regular IRA. Could be a traditional IRA, could be a Roth IRA. The key is it's opened and owned by the spouse who doesn't work or earns very little. The term spousal IRA really describes how the strategy, the contribution method that lets you put money into that spouse's account.
Ah, okay. So the secret sauce isn't the account itself, it's how you fund it. Which brings us back to that earned income problem we started with.
Exactly. The basic rule for putting money into your own IRA is you need earned income, wages, salary, that kind of thing. No earned income, generally no IRA contribution.
Which is the hurdle for the spouse who stepped back from working.
Right. But the spousal IRA contribution strategy, it's a specific IRS exception made just for married couples who file taxes jointly. It lets the spouse without enough earned income contribute to an IRA in their own name, but the justification, the income basis, comes from the working spouse's earnings.
So the working spouse's income basically covers the requirement for both of them, for both potential IRA contributions.
That's exactly it. As long as the working spouse makes enough, meaning their taxable compensation covers both their own IRA contribution, if they make one, and the contribution going into the non-working spouse's IRA, then the non-working spouse can contribute. The total combined contributions can't be more than the total taxable compensation on your joint return.
And you stressed it's a regular IRA owned by the non-working spouse. So really important. And these are individual accounts, right? Not joint property.
Absolutely critical. It's not like a joint checking account. The IRA belongs legally to the person whose name is on it, period. Doesn't matter where the contribution money technically came from. Ownership is clear.
Why does that ownership distinction matter so much day to day or long term?
Well, a few reasons. First, control. The owner's spouse makes the investment calls, decides what happens with the money in their IRA. Second, think about difficult situations, like divorce. That IRA is considered the asset of the spouse who owns it. Now, it might get divided based on state law or the settlement, but the starting point is individual ownership.
Which gives the non-working spouse a real piece of financial security in their own name.
Exactly. It builds their own independent retirement savings. And third, it impacts inheritance, which we can touch on later. Beneficiary rules depend completely on who legally owned that account.
Okay, so let's recap Section 1. A spousal IRA isn't a special account type. It's a strategy. It lets a non-working spouse fund their own traditional or Roth IRA using the working spouse's income to meet the contribution requirement. And crucially, the account is owned individually. That's the gist.
That's the core mechanism, yep.
All right, let's get into the nitty-gritty. Who can actually use this? What are the specific rules, the limitations? Because, the IRS always has rules.
Oh, absolutely. So looking at your sources, the key eligibility boxes you have to tick are, first, got to be legally married.
Sure.
Second, you must file your federal taxes jointly. filing separately. This strategy is off the table.
Okay, married filing jointly. Got it.
And third, back to the income, the working spouse needs enough earned income. Their taxable compensation has to be at least as much as the total amount being contributed to both spouses' IRAs for that year.
So let's say for 2025, they want to put $7,000 in the working spouse's IRA and $7,000 in the non-working spouse's IRA. Total $14,000. The working spouse needs to have earned at least $14,000 that year.
Correct. If they only earn, say, $10,000, then the total combined contributions for both couldn't be more than $10,000. And the sources also point out there's no age limit for the non-working spouse to open or contribute via this strategy, though the usual age 50-plus catch-up rules still apply to the individual, of course.
Let's nail down those contribution limits. What's the max a couple can put away using this?
Okay, so the spousal IRA contribution follows the same yearly limits as any regular IRA contribution. For 2025, the limit is $7,000 per person.
Per person. So $7,000 for the working spouse, potentially, and $7,000 for the non-working spouse's IRA, assuming they meet the rules.
Exactly. And don't forget the catch-up. If you're 50 or older by the end of the year, you can add an extra $1,000. So for 2025, that makes the individual limit $8,000.
And the sources mentioned the 2024 limits were the same numbers, right? $7,000 or $8,000 if 50 plus.
Correct. So think about it. A couple fully using the spousal IRA strategy can potentially put away double the individual limit each year. That's $14,000 total, or $16,000 if both spouses are 50 or older and doing the catch-up. That doubling, that's a really big deal.
That really brings home that power of two idea, putting away $14,000 or $16,000 a year versus maybe just $7,000 or $8,000. I mean, over decades, it's huge.
It's massive. That T. Rowe Price source had a great illustration. They ran a hypothetical like over 20 years, assuming maybe a 7% average return. If only the working spouse contributes $7,000 a year, that's $140,000 total put in. It might grow to around $300,000. But if the couple uses the spousal IRA and puts in $14,000 a year, $280,000 total contributions, that could grow to roughly $600,000.
Wow. So literally double the contributions potentially leads to double the final amount. It's not just the extra money going in, it's the compound growth on that extra money. That difference is pretty staggering.
Yeah, it really shows how this rule can seriously accelerate a couple's retirement savings.
Okay, but here comes the complexity, right? The income limits.
Yeah.
Because even if you can contribute based on earned income using the spousal rule, whether you get a tax deduction for a traditional IRA or if you can even contribute to a Roth IRA at all, that depends on your household income.
That's exactly right. This is where things get layered. We need to talk about adjusted gross income, or AGI. That's basically your gross income minus some specific deductions.
Okay, let's tackle traditional IRA deductibility first. Your sources say this really depends on whether either spouse has a retirement plan at work, like a 401k.
Yes, that's the trigger. So, scenario one, if neither of you is covered by a workplace plan, then typically any contributions you make to a traditional IRA for either spouse, including the spousal contribution, are fully tax deductible. Doesn't matter what your AGI is, as long as you have the earned income to cover it.
Okay, that's the simpler case. But what if the working spouse does have a 401k or similar plan? How does that change the deduction, especially for the non-working spouse's contribution?
Right, this is common. Here, your joint AGI comes into play. If the working spouse is covered by a plan, the ability for the non-working spouse to take a deduction for their traditional IRA contribution starts to phase out once your joint AGI hits certain levels.
Phase out meaning the deduction gets smaller as your income goes up in a certain range until it disappears.
Exactly. For 2025, that phase-out range for the non-working spouse's traditional IRA deduction is $236,000 to $246,000 of joint AGI. For 2024, it was $230,000 to $240,000. If your joint AGI is above the top of that range for the year, the non-working spouse's contribution isn't deductible.
Okay, so that phase-out range for the non-working spouse is pretty high. What about the working spouse? If they're covered by a plan, what's their limit for deducting their own traditional IRA contribution?
Their limit kicks in much lower. The sources show for 2025, the working spouse's deduction phases out between $126,000 and $146,000 of joint AGI. For 2024, that was $123,000 to $143,000.
Okay, this is where it gets tricky. So a couple could have, say, $150,000 AGI in 2025. The working spouse, covered by a plan, probably can't deduct their own traditional IRA contribution because 150K is over their 146K limit. But the non-working spouse could still deduct their contribution.
Precisely, because 150K is well below the non-working spouse's separate phase-out range. which starts way up at $236K for 2025. So yes, in that scenario, the non-working spouse's contribution could still be deductible, even though the working spouse's isn't.
Wow, okay. The rules are really specific to whose account it is and who has the workplace coverage.
Yes, even though you file jointly, the deductibility can differ between spouses.
And what if your income is too high to get a deduction for the traditional IRA? Can you still put money in?
Generally, yes. You can usually still make what's called a non-deductible contribution to a traditional IRA up to the limit. You don't get the tax break now, but the money inside the account still grows tax deferred. You just pay taxes on the earnings when you take it out later.
So you don't get taxed on the original contribution amount again, just the growth. Still better tax treatment than a regular investment account.
Correct. It still has a tax advantage. Okay, now let's switch gears to Roth IRAs. Remember, Roth contributions are never tax deductible because you use after-tax money. But there are income limits on whether you can contribute to a Roth at all, even using the spousal strategy.
And this is based on modified adjusted gross income, MAGI, which is slightly different from AGI.
Yeah, MGI adds back certain deductions to your AGI. For Roth eligibility for married couples filing jointly, there's a MAGI phase-out range. Your sources give the 2025 range as $236,000 to $236,000 to $246,000. For 2024, it was $230,000 to $240,000.
So if your joint NGI is over $246,000 in 2025 or was over $240K in 2024, you generally just can't contribute directly to a Roth IRA for either spouse, even with the spousal approach.
That's typically correct based on those income levels. You'd be completely phased out of direct Roth contributions. These income limits are really key for figuring out your options.
Okay, woof, that's a lot on the income rules. Maybe some quick examples would help cement this, like the ones in the sources.
Good idea.
Let's say Sarah and Tom married filing jointly. Tom earns $80. Sarah stays home, no income. Neither has a workplace plan. They want to contribute for both for 2025.
Okay, Tom's $80 earned income. Plenty to cover $7,000 for him and $7,000 for Sarah. Since neither has a workplace plan, if they put that money into traditional IRAs, both contributions, $14,000 total, should be fully tax deductible. Their $80 KAGI doesn't matter for deductibility here.
Nice and simple. Okay, same couple. Tom earns $80K, Sarah earns 0. But now Tom is covered by a 401K. Their joint AGI is, say, $75,000 after deductions.
All right, 2025 scenario. Dom's deduction for his own traditional IRA starts phasing out at $126K joint AGI. Since their AGI is only $75K, well below that, Tom can likely deduct his $7,000 contribution.
And Sarah, the non-working spouse.
Your traditional IRA deduction phase-out doesn't start until $236K joint AGI for 2025. The $75K is way under that. So Sarah can also make a deductible traditional IRA contribution of $7,000.
So even with Tom's 401K, because their income is low relative to Sarah's higher threshold, her contribution is still deductible. Interesting.
Exactly. The rules apply differently depending on whose account and whose workplace coverage we're talking about for that specific limit.
Okay, Roth example, same couple. Tom, 80 GI, Sarah, 0. Joint NGI is $75,000. Can they do Roth?
Yep. The Roth MAGI phase-out for married joint filers starts way up at $236,000 in 2025. Since their $75K AGI is far below that, both Tom and Sarah, using the spousal strategy, can contribute the full $7,000 each to Roth IRAs for 2025. No deduction now, but tax-free qualified withdrawals later.
Got it. Last one. What if Sarah and Tom's joint MGI is $250,000 in 2025? Can they do Roth?
Well, the 2025 Roth phase-out ends at $246,000. So at $250K MAGI, they're above the limit. Generally, no direct Roth contributions for either of them that year.
Okay. Yeah. These examples really drive home how your specific income, your filing status, and workplace plan coverage all mix together. It's definitely not one size fits all.
And always remember that earned income has to be well earned. Investment income, pension income, Social Security that doesn't count for justifying the contributions.
Which definitely explains why getting professional advice is often a good idea. But before we talk setup, let's really hammer home the why. We've touched on benefits, but why should couples really prioritize this if they qualify?
There are several really strong reasons based on the sources. Number one, and maybe the most crucial, is it empowers the spouse who isn't working or earns less.
Gives them their own retirement savings, their own stake.
Precisely. Think about it in households where one person earns most of the income, the other spouse can feel financially dependent, especially looking towards retirement. The Spousal IRA ensures they are building their own retirement asset in their own name. That's huge for their long-term security and independence, whatever happens down the road, divorce, death of the partner.
It's like building a personal financial safety net, giving them ownership.
Absolutely. It means they're not losing those valuable saving and compounding years just because they stepped out of the paid workforce for a while.
And then there's the sheer math of it, the impact on the couple's total savings. That T. Rowe Price example was eye-opening.
That's the second big why. Doubling your contribution potential 14K or 16 Duggars instead of 7Ks or 8 Taylors means you accumulate wealth much, much faster. Over decades, that extra principal compounds, and the difference can be enormous, potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars more, just like that illustration showed.
It's like hitting the accelerator on your retirement goals as a team.
It really is. Plus, you're maximizing tax advantages. Depending on income and whether you choose traditional or Roth, you're getting significant tax benefits, either that upfront deduction or tax-free growth and withdrawals later.
So you save more, and you save more tax efficiently.
Exactly. You're using the tax rules to your advantage to grow your nest egg faster and potentially access it more favorably later.
The sources also mention flexibility, right? For the future.
Yeah, like what if the non-working spouse plans to go back to work? Or maybe one spouse wants to retire a few years before the other. The Spousal IRA strategy allows the still working spouse to keep contributing to the retired spouse's IRA for those extra years based on the working spouse's income. It helps bridge potential gaps.
Okay, so the core benefits are really clear. Empowers the individual, doubles the savings potential, maximizes tax efficiency, adds flexibility. It's a major strategic plus for couples.
Definitely. It leverages that married filing jointly status in a really powerful way that singles or unmarried couples just don't have access to.
So once a couple is on board with the idea of a spousal IRA, they hit that fork in the road, traditional or Roth. We know the basic tax difference, but how do you actually decide which type of account to open for the non-working spouse?
Yeah, that's a really important decision. It boils down to your specific financial picture and what you expect, especially regarding taxes down the line. We know traditional might give you a tax break now, but withdrawals are taxed later. Roth is the reverse pay tax now, use after-tax money, but qualified withdrawals are tax-free.
So it really hinges on whether you think your tax rate will be higher or lower in retirement compared to now.
That's a huge factor, yes. If you think you'll be in a higher tax bracket when you retire, maybe because the other spouse will still be working, or you'll have significant RMDs from other accounts, then funding a Roth IRA now for the non-working spouse often makes a lot of sense. You pay the tax now, potentially while your household income is lower because one spouse isn't working, and then all that growth comes out tax-free later when your rate might be higher.
Locking in the tax-free benefit at today's potentially lower rate.
Exactly. But if you expect to be in a definitively lower tax bracket in retirement, then getting that upfront deduction from a traditional IRA contribution now could be more valuable. You save on taxes during your potentially higher earning years, thanks to the working spouse's income, and pay taxes on withdrawals later when your overall income and tax rate are lower.
You also mentioned income trajectory, particularly for the non-working spouse.
Right. Let's say the non-working spouse fully intends to go back to work later, maybe even earn a high income. Making Roth contributions now, while your joint MGI might be lower and still qualify you for Roth, is super strategic. You're building up a bucket of tax-free money that you might not be eligible to contribute to directly later on when your combined income is much higher.
Kind of like getting in while the getting's good.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And, the sources often lean towards the Roth IRA having an edge for spousal contributions in many common situations.
Why is Roth often seen as particularly good for this strategy?
Well, a few things. Tax diversification is one. Having a mix of accounts, some taxable on withdrawal like traditional IRAs or 401k, and some tax-free like Roth IRAs, gives you tremendous flexibility in retirement. You can choose which accounts to draw from each year to help manage your income level and potentially lower your overall tax bill.
More control over your taxes when you're actually living off the money.
Yes. Another big plus for Roth is contribution flexibility. You can always take out your original Roth contributions, not the earnings, just the principal tax-free and penalty-free, anytime for any reason. That's not something you can do with a traditional IRA without facing taxes and penalties unless you meet very specific hardship exceptions.
So it offers a sort of emergency access layer, although ideally you wouldn't touch retirement funds early.
Right. That flexibility, plus the tax-free growth and withdrawals, makes the Roth Spousal IRA really attractive for many couples. It also acts as a hedge if you think tax rates might go up in the future.
But to be fair, if a couple is in a really high tax bracket right now because of the working spouse's high income, and they're pretty confident they'll be in a much lower bracket later, That immediate tax deduction from a traditional IRA can be very tempting and might be the better choice for them.
Absolutely. It's not automatic. The decision needs a careful look at your current versus expected future tax situation, your income stability, and your overall retirement plan.
Okay, makes sense. So decision made, traditional or Roth. How do you actually set one up? What are the practical steps? Is it complicated?
Good news here. The process is usually pretty straightforward. Like we said, it's just a regular IRA.
So pick a place, a brokerage firm, maybe your bank, or use a financial advisor.
Yep. Choose your provider.
Yeah.
Decide if it's going to be traditional or Roth for this spousal contribution.
And the absolute key step, open the account in the legal name of the non-working or lower-earning spouse. Cannot stress that enough.
Reinforcing that individual ownership again. Crucial. Once that account exists in their name, you contribute the money. The funds can come from anywhere. Usually the working spouse's paycheck funds the household account it comes from. And remember, you can contribute for the current year, but you also have until the tax filing deadline next year, usually April 15th, to make contributions for the previous year.
Which gives you some breathing room after year-end to figure out your income and make the contribution. And then once the money's in, the owner spouse invests it.
That's right. They choose the investments, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs, whatever the provider offers. Now, some sources, like in Trust Group, mention self-directed IRAs or SDIRAs.
Right. Those let you invest in things like real estate or maybe gold within an IRA.
They do. And you can use the spousal IRA contribution strategy to fund an SDIRA in the non-working spouse's name, then use those funds for alternative investments. However, the sources are really clear. SDIRAs add a significant layer of complexity. There are strict IRS rules about prohibited transactions, basically things you can't do, like self-dealing, and you might run into taxes inside the IRA, like UBT or UDFI, if the investments generate certain kinds of business or debt-financed income.
So possible, but definitely sounds like something requiring expert help and careful planning, not for beginners.
Absolutely. Needs specialized advice on SDIRA rules, not just the basic spousal IRA rules.
Okay, so before hitting contribute on any IRA, spousal, or otherwise, what are the non-negotiable checks?
Go back to basics. 1, are you legally married and filing jointly for the contribution year? 2, does the working spouse have enough earned income to cover the total contributions for both of you?
And 3, circling back to the income limits. Are you sure you qualify? Especially for Roth, are you under the MAGI limit? If doing traditional and one of you has a work plan, have you checked the AGI limits to see if you'll actually get the deduction you expect?
Exactly. Confirm eligibility for the contribution top, Roth, and the expected tax treatment, traditional deduction.
What are the classic mistakes people make here? The common traps?
Biggest one is probably still thinking it's a joint account. It's not. Another is contributing more than the working spouse actually earned, and a huge one is messing up the income limits.
Like contributing to a Roth when your MGI is too high. Or putting money in a traditional IRA thinking you'll get a deduction, but oops, your AGI is too high because one of you has a 401k.
Precisely. These errors can mean unexpected tax bills, penalties for excess contributions, or simply missing out on the best tax strategy for your situation. Maybe you made a non-deductible traditional contribution when a Roth would have been possible and potentially better long-term.
Which is why those sources like Port Brown and Pacific Tax and Financial Group kept saying, talk to a professional.
It makes sense. A good financial advisor or tax pro can look at your numbers, help you figure out your AGI and MAGI, confirm you qualify, see if a deduction applies, and help you decide between traditional and Roth based on your specific goals. Trying to perfectly navigate all these interacting rules on your own, it can be tricky.
Getting professional advice really seems like the way to make sure you're doing it right and getting the most benefit.
It's definitely worth considering to ensure you maximize this great opportunity safely.
Okay, we've covered a ton. What it is, who qualifies, the rules, the big benefits, traditional versus Roth, setup, and avoiding mistakes. Let's just briefly touch on the end game. What happens to this spousal IRA eventually, like with inheritance? Charles Schwab and others had info on this.
Right. So because it's an individual account owned by the non-working spouse, if they pass away, that IRA becomes an inherited IRA for whoever they named as beneficiary.
And if the surviving spouse, maybe the one who is working, is the beneficiary?
Well, surviving spouses generally get the best options compared to other beneficiaries, like kids. The Schwab source points out the main choice. The surviving spouse can treat the inherited IRA as their own.
What does that mean, treat it as their own?
They can essentially roll the money into their existing IRA or open a new one in their name and move the funds there. This is usually the best route because the money keeps growing tax advantage based on the surviving spouse's age and life expectancy. Things like required minimum distributions, or RMDs, wouldn't typically start until the surviving spouse reaches their own RMD age. Withdrawals follow their own rules penalties before their age, 59.5, etc.
So they basically absorb it into their own retirement plan, keeping the tax benefits going based on their timeline.
Exactly. There are other technical options for inherited IRAs, but treating it as their own usually offers the most flexibility and continued growth potential for a surviving spouse.
So, without getting too deep into all the inherited IRA rules, the key takeaway related to the spousal IRA strategy is setting up that separate account for the non-working spouse creates clear ownership and provides these favorable inheritance options for the surviving spouse, enhancing their long-term security too.
Absolutely. It reinforces that individual ownership point and makes sure the asset integrates smoothly into the surviving spouse's financial life if needed.
Wow, okay. This has been a really comprehensive deep dive into spousal IRAs.
Yeah, we've clarified it's a contribution strategy for a standard IRA, not some unique account, letting a non-working spouse save for retirement using the working spouse's income.
We covered the rules. Got to be married, file jointly, and the working spouse needs enough earned income.
We hit the contribution limits, $7,000 or $8,000 if 50 or older per person for 2025, and stressed how that lets couples potentially double their savings and really ramp up compound growth, like that T. Rowe Price example showed.
And we wrestled with those income limits, AGI and MGI, and how they impact whether a traditional contribution is deductible, which can differ for each spouse, and whether you can contribute to a Roth at all.
We talked about the powerful why, giving the non-working spouse financial independence, boosting household savings, maximizing tax breaks, and adding planning flexibility.
Plus, we explored the traditional versus Roth decision based on tax expectations, the simple setup process remembering to open it in the non-working spouse's name, and the critical need to avoid mistakes and consider professional advice.
And just touched on how that individual ownership leads to favorable inheritance options for a surviving spouse down the road.
So, bottom line for you listening right now, if you're married and one of you isn't working or earns significantly less, looking into the spousal IRA isn't just, a minor tax tweak. It's a really fundamental strategy for building a stronger, more equitable retirement future together. It directly tackles that problem we started with, making sure time out of the workforce doesn't mean time out of saving for retirement.
It's a specific tool the tax code offers to support families and help ensure both partners can build financial security for their later years.
So here's a final thought to chew on. Think about the spousal IRA not just as some rule in the tax code, but as a chance to actively invest in financial equality and shared security within your own partnership. What conversation does this spark for you? What's one step you could take, maybe even today, to figure out how this powerful strategy might fit into your own family's financial plan?